So we're finally getting back to the World War II boot series by reviewing the Corcoran Jump Boots today. These were made famous in World War II by the US Paratroopers. They were the boots that were used by the men that were parachuting behind enemy lines. They needed a strong, reliable, agile boot. But this is not that boot of that era. This is a reproduction of that boot made by the same guys that make Thorogoods. So we're going to chop it in half, run it through our test, really see if this lives up to the heritage and the name of the jump boot, or if it's more of a cosplay version of the jump boot. And thanks to Tommy John for sponsoring this video. Tommy John, if you don't know, they make no adjustment needed underwear and apparel. You know, you got your boxers, you've got your loungewear. This is the stuff I really like. It's kind of like a corduroy loungewear that's really light but kind of keeps you warm, because for me, at the end of the day, I'm not one that just takes my clothes off and jumps in bed. I need some unwind time. I need to relax into the evening to really release some of the stress and then finally go to bed. So in that time period, I like to be cozy, and Tommy John offers a lot of really unique loungewear and comfort wear and casual wear. They have stuff from like these hoodies that are a lightweight hoodie, so they're not super hot. They offer this like corduroy looking stretchy fabric that's really comfortable and really soft. It's kind of crazy how soft it is. And part of this ad was they asked me to buy a gift for somebody, and I didn't know it was going to be part of the ad, so I just asked the guys in the editing room, like, does anyone need any underwear? And Sam was like, I'll use some underwear. And so we bought Sam some underwear, not knowing that in this ad I thought to be like, well, the gift that I gave for this holiday was to Sam, my employee, for underwear. So that's what we ended up giving Sam, and he really likes the underwear. I really like the underwear. On occasion we have days where we're wearing matching underwear, which is a nice boss employee relationship builder. And the thing that sets Tommy John apart is they're designed for motion. That means no pinching, no bunching, or no riding up. And they have all premium fabrics and materials with innovative fits and problem-solving functionality. And if you're shopping for somebody else, whether it's one of your employees for their underwear or family or friends, they have nice gift guides. And it's just one of the best ways to stay comfortable this holiday season. So click the link in my description and use the code ROSEANVIL to get 25% off your purchase and free shipping. And thanks again to Tommy John for sponsoring this video. So now let's go over the history of the jump boot. So it all started in 1941. They were designed by Lieutenant Colonel Yarborough, who also designed the actual parachutist jump wings and the M42 uniform and other various parachute delivery equipment. So he's a pretty prolific designer for stuff during the war. And you might be wondering, what are paratroopers? Well, paratroopers were dropped behind enemy lines, like I mentioned, to soften up the enemy troops, to secure needed targets, and basically doing anything that you would need done by the highest skilled people behind enemy lines was relegated to the paratroopers. And so that's why they needed a really reliable boot, because paratroopers would potentially be on their own for weeks and weeks at a time, and they needed gear that they could rely on and depend on, that wasn't going to break down, that they could repair and make work in any situation with almost no access to any sort of tools or equipment. And those paratroopers carried, on average, 70 pounds of equipment. Officers averaged 90 pounds of gear. And with the parachute, men weighed in at 90 to 120 pounds over their natural body weight. So the boots were unique amongst the other World War II boots that we've reviewed, where they have like the buckles and the shaft up, or like some of the other boots that had more synthetic materials. These boots were unique because they were full calf length, so basically an 8 or 10 inch boot, and they were completely leather. And up to this point, the majority of the US soldiers were wearing a lot shorter boots that came with either like wool leggings or canvas leg wraps, stuff like that. Very similar to what we cut apart with the British World War II boots and the Japanese World War II boots. And if you're wondering where the Corcoran Jump Boot name came from, it was nicknamed the Corcoran Jump Boot after the J.F. Corcoran Shoe Company, which was one of the original manufacturers of this boot. And these boots during the time were known as some of the most durable, tough as nails boots. They were tough to break in, but once they're broken in, they're a great boot. And people really wanted these boots. They were highly sought after, similar to what we did with the British World War II boots. People were trading and bargaining and trying to get their way into a pair of these boots during World War II because of how much more people liked these boots rather than the standard issue ones. And these were used across the entire world. They were used in Sicily, Italy, France, Belgium, Holland, Germany. And then in 1945, the design was retired and replaced by the M43 boots, which were a similar looking boot, but you had this collar with the buckles on it. And the paratroopers didn't like this because it was led to a higher chance of some of their parachuting gear being stuck in the buckles instead of laces. And they just preferred the original jump boots over the new issued boot. So even though it had a short 4-year run, it still was a very impactful boot on the boot design world, the boot industry, and it still exists today as a very popular boot as the Corcoran Jump Boot. And so that's the history of it. So now I'll start going through the details, starting with the leather first, because the leather is really bad. It's not good leather. And part of that is because it's, you know, it's $120 or $155 and it's made in the US. So the corners have to be cut somewhere, and part of the appeal of this is that it's spit shinable. And so this leather is a really heavily coated leather. You know, we put the flame to it to see if it's a plastic coating or if it's just pigment, and it looks like it's just a really heavy layer of pigment on top. So because it didn't really burn and fizzle like we see in like the Nike leathers that have like polyurethane on top. The thickness of this leather is about 1.7 to 2 millimeters thick, so a little bit on the thinner side, like what we see in like a lighter weight work boot or even down to sneaker thicknesses. And then we put the macro lens on the cross section. You can see there is just a little bit of the grain left, but this leather just generally has a lot looser fiber structure. Like if you look at the cross section compared to a higher quality leather, it's a lot more fibrous and it's a lot less dense. So it's not going to be nearly as durable as a lot of the other work boots out there, but it's probably about the same durability as like a sneaker leather. And to put this leather to the test, we decided to do the rattlesnake test on it to see how many pounds it takes to pierce through the upper leather, and it took 62.5 pounds. So not super great, but not horrible. So it is a fairly puncture resistant leather. And overall, if I were to grade this leather, because it has the really heavy pigment on top, it has a little bit of the grain left, and because it is just a really loose fiber structure leather, this to me would be like a B- leather, you know, maybe a C leather, somewhere in that range. But it is spit shinable, and it is a leather that will last as long as like a pair of sneakers would. And if we get this untied, and also these laces are just some of the worst leather laces. They're kind of like the rawhide that you get on a baseball mitt. They are not great. So if we look on the inside of the boot, you can see that there's no lining in the shaft of the boot, and there's also no lining in the vamp of the boot, which is pretty unique. I would say, I think every single modern boot that we've cut apart at least has some sort of cotton drill lining in the vamp. So it's really interesting that this one does not. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think the linings give it a little extra support in some of this high wear area, and it maybe smooths it out a little bit so you don't get high pressure points where the edges of the leather are. But I just thought it was kind of odd that it didn't have a lining. And you can also see on the inside that and from the outside, there's a supportive strap that's sewn in from the instep down to basically the heel. And we've seen this in the jungle boots that we cut apart and went through. And the idea behind this is to give it extra support, to give you more ankle support, especially for the paratroopers who are landing on their feet and need as much support as possible so they don't break their ankle behind enemy lines. And I'm surprised we don't see this in more modern boots, because it's a really smart way of reinforcing a boot without adding a whole lot of bulk to it. So I think it is cool that even these modern versions have that strap on the inside. And then if you look at the insole, I thought for sure that we didn't get sent the full boot or the insole or something, because all it is a layer of a pour-on type foam, like a memory foam type that you're standing on top of, and usually they'll put like a layer of leather on top or a layer of fabric so that you don't tear apart that foam as you're wearing them, because foam is really squishy, but if you're really putting like lateral pressure on it, it crumbles really easily. So I was surprised that there wasn't some sort of lining on the insole, and there's a hard line where there's clearly two different layers of foam put on top of each other, and it's just kind of a weird thing. Like, once again, I don't know why there's not a lining in the vamp, and I don't know why there isn't a lining at all on top of the insole. But maybe there's something underneath. Maybe it makes sense when you get it cut in half, so I'll wait to pass full judgment on that. And then if you look at the sole construction, you can see the midsole pretty well, because that's a half sole here at the forefoot. And this looks like leather, and I would have guessed it was leather up until we did that Alden video where we really dove into the leather board, where they take lots of the loose leather fibers from when they've like sanded leather down or split it and ground it up into loose fibers, and they reconstitute it with some sort of rubber compound. So you get kind of this half rubber, half leather material that a lot of people, including myself, think is less high quality than real leather and less durable than real leather. You usually only see leather board on cheaper boots, including these boots that are $250. You usually see the full grain leather midsoles on the higher quality boots, and it seems to be a pretty common trend. But at least leather board is more durable than like a compressed cardboard or fiberboard. But for an affordable midsole layer, leather board is pretty decent. I'd say it's on par with like a rubber. Some people will say it's more durable, but I would argue it's less durable, because the little leather fibers throughout the rubber compound, I would assume leads to more fracture points that would cause the midsole to split easier than leather that's more of a homogeneous structure. And I've talked to some cobblers about that, and that seems to be the case with the majority of boots that they've seen with leatherboard compared to rubber. So not as good as leather, but maybe not as bad as just a rubber sheet. And then if we look at the outsole, so this is a very old school pattern. It's very similar to the original patterns they put on the boots. And I like the little brass nails. I think they're mostly there just for the look, because I doubt they're really tacking it too well onto the midsole. And it has 2 rows of stitching. The inner stitching stitches the outsole to the midsole, and this outer layer of stitching stitches the outsole all the way through the welt. And then the heel is also a rubber pad that you can see the nails have been driven through. And as for the construction, this is a 270-degree Goodyear welt where there's a single strip of leather that's used as a structural piece that combines the upper to the outsole, and that's where that stitching on the bottom stitches all the way up through the top right here. And the welt itself is real leather, which was really good to see, because I believe these are made by the same guys that make Thorogoods, and Thorogoods have that synthetic welt. So I was at least glad to see that there's a leather welt on there, because it's more durable than a plastic or rubber welt. We took a durometer measurement of the outsole, and it came in at 83 Shore A, so a pretty tough, hard outsole. That's a little bit harder than even the Vibram outsoles, so it should be a fairly long-lasting outsole, maybe just not quite as grippy. And then we also did the puncture test on the outsole to see how many pounds it takes to pierce through the outsole of a boot all the way to the inside, and it took 175 pounds to pierce through. So not too bad. And that's basically everything we can know about this boot before we cut it in half. I'm really curious if this toe cap is a real true double layer toe cap, and if it really is a Goodyear welted construction, because sometimes they're really good at hiding it. And I'm really curious what's on the inside, if there's just foam underneath your foot, or if there's other layers. Does it have a shank? So let's get it cut in half. All right, we got it chopped in half, so let's see what's inside. So there's some really odd things in this boot. You know, we talked about the foam being right where your foot sits and not having any sort of covering. It's made even worse by the fact that you have several different layers of foam just stacked on top of each other. Because at the heel, you have this one piece that's just cut off at a 90-degree angle. Then underneath, you have another piece, and then you have that full length piece. So at the heel, you have 3 separate layers, and they're not stacked up super neatly. They're just glued together, but not very well glued together. It's just not very durable to be standing on just foam. That should have some sort of layer on top if you really wanted to get these to last a decently long time. But at least it does have fiberboard underneath. You know, it's not just like foam glued in there, which was part of my fear. And technically it does have a cork filling. It's just very sparse on the amount of cork that's thrown in there. And it does have a steel shank, which was really good to see. And then other than that, there's not a whole lot else in here. You know, it is truly Goodyear welted. It's nailed at the heel. You can see the nails going up through the sole construction. And you can see the rand is plastic, and there's a big void underneath of there that maybe should be filled up with cork or maybe another filler layer. So it's a very pared down, simplified boot. But one thing I really do like is that this is built on the Munson last. It's a very anatomical, like foot shaped last. And I think that's part of why people really like these boots, because they do look very comfortable. They're not the most pretty toe box, but at least it's wide and comfortable. So there's at least one positive with this boot. So overall, is this boot worth the price? So it's $250. It's made in the United States with global parts. So usually what that means is they buy certain parts pre-made in different countries, and it's hard, you can never really know exactly which parts are. It could be the upper that's completely sewn together and then it's just lasted in the United States. They could be just referring to the outsole. It could mean any different thing, but the majority of the shoe or the boot is still constructed in the United States. And so for $250, comparing it to the other Thorogoods, the Thorogoods are clearly a better quality. That's better leather. It's got a better sole construction, better materials, and it's just finished a lot better.
Better ingredients, better pizza, Papa John's.
And if you compare it to a little bit higher priced products like the Red Wings and Thursdays that are made in the United States, those two brands have a little bit higher quality materials throughout the construction that's finished a little bit better, and it's more ready for everyday use. So to me, this boot, it's right on that line. Like, I think it's maybe a little bit expensive for what you get, but that kind of leads to the next question is, what is this boot? Is it actually a work boot? Can you actually depend on this boot? Or is it a cosplay boot? I think it's more of a cosplay boot, if we're being honest. I don't think you would get a whole lot of use out of this insole without any kind of lining on top of it if you're actually using it for work. But if you're just wanting a boot that you can kind of kick around in and it has that paratrooper look that you're not going to be wearing and depending on every single day, it is at least Goodyear welted. It has a shank, it has some decent materials. They're just not up to what it could be and should be if you're planning on wearing these all day, every day. And so now the last thing to do is rank this on the MITUSA board because it is technically made in the United States. So we put it on the board. It's pretty clearly underneath the Thorogoods and obviously above the Yeezys. So right there at the second to bottom spot. And I think that's a pretty fair placing. So let me know what you guys think and how you would place this on our MITUSA board. And if you had a pair of these, what your experience has been in them, if you've had any issues with this foam layer. And they also make a couple other Corcoran jump boots. They're not all just the specific historic costume boot. They have a couple other that might be higher quality. So I wouldn't write off Corcoran completely, but this boot is a little bit of a costume boot. So let me know what you guys think, and thank you so much for everything you guys do for this channel. And don't forget to download Kara and enter to win a pair of Lost and Found Jordan 1s or a pair of whites and some cash by adding your Christmas Grail item, your favorite, your dream Christmas gift to the giveaway board to enter you to win. All you have to do is install Kara on Google Chrome or download it on the App Store if you have an iPhone. And the prize goes up the more people enter. And the giveaway ends on the 8th, so check it out below. And thanks again. See ya.